It's another double box edition of the Hub of Champions with your host, Shukri Wrights. If you're watching on YouTube or anywhere else, you can see I have another guest, a great guest on the Hub of Champions podcast. For those of you listening across podcast and iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts, I appreciate you as always. I am joined by a fabled member of Patriots Dynasty 1.0. If you're a Patriots fan, you sure as hell should know who I'm about to bring onto the pod. Three-time Super Bowl champion, former NFL linebacker Matt Chatham, who used to be on Nesson, very well known in New England. He joins the pod. Matt, thank you for hopping on this Friday night. And because of you, I'm now cooking barbecue wings in the oven as we record this podcast. True story,
Yeah,
by the way. Welcome to the
yeah,
pod.
yeah. I'm glad to be here. We got talking a little off air about food, and now my mind's elsewhere.
I'm thinking about barbecue right now. I can actually
Yeah.
smell it coming up. I'm coming up the stairs in my house.
Oh yeah,
Like,
oh yeah,
I mean, my goodness. Like, seriously, what a time for you to hop on the pod, getting ready for
yeah,
Super Bowl 58
yeah,
in about 9 days, and like everything that has gone on in as it pertains to the Patriots, which we'll get to in
yeah,
just a moment. But as someone who has played in three Super Bowls, Super Bowl 36, Super Bowl 38, and Super Bowl 39,
yeah.
what was that time period like for you as you were getting ready to play in the biggest game of your life? I mean,
Right.
let's face it, I mean, the Super Bowl. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard many NFL players say the Super Bowl is the biggest game that you ever play in your life, and so forth. And you've done it three times in your NFL career. What is that period like for you?
So they're distinct memories, and I have to kind of be careful with this because
Sure.
we're really, really lucky, fortunate, whatever, that we got the second and third chance, right? Because the
Mm,
first one was it was an unusual one, and I don't think anyone that's ever gotten to play one of these things had it as we did, other than the Rams,
mm,
because we didn't get the extra week. So that was the 9/11 year in
yes.
2001.
Mm,
So we had a pause week in the season, so everything was set back. So when we won the AFC Championship game in Pittsburgh, we were partying in the locker room, booze on the plane, touchdown in Foxborough, and we
wow.
were basically right back into the meeting room
Yeah.
uh, to plan, basically run home to get your stuff, pack a bag, and we're going to New Orleans.
Wow.
So it was a whirlwind. And I mean, you add into the fact that everything was truncated and shortened and we had to be down there in a minute. Uh, and then add in the fact that we weren't favorites. It's not like we were
Yeah.
sitting there in October, November, December planning and dreaming of doing this. It
Mm,
really, we caught steam late, and it's sort of a, whoa, we did this, right? So the reason I
mm,
always say that when people ask about the experience, I'm
yeah.
almost like ashamed to say how little of it I remember. Like it's pathetic, but
Mm,
anecdotes. Night out on Monday night or Tuesday, whatever it was. Stuff from sort of media day. Yeah, of course, a handful of plays and stuff from the game. But it's not as like I didn't do as good of a job of just, recording it and stamping it in stone and really soaking it all in. And so when we weren't good enough, we weren't even a playoff team the next year. We were borderline in
mm,
'02. And
yeah.
then we get to go back in '03. And it's like, man, I am every little corny thing, that you kind of like, I don't need to do that, like everything, every memorabilia piece, every little family outreach thing, everything going on with Super Bowl. Like, second and third time around, I mean, I was the first one in line. So you you want to have as much fun with it as you can. But I mean, it's just once in a lifetime memory. So a super quick one. People were actually texting me, or I'm sorry, tweeting at me about this the other day because I was
Mm,
tweeting about the We Are the World documentary on the doc on
yeah.
Netflix,
Yep.
and Lionel Richie. So this is after the second Super Bowl, the one in Houston.
Yep.
And I mean,
Both of them.
the regular lineup for entertainment, it was at the International Hotel. I don't think it's called that anymore, but gorgeous place. That's where the post party is. Black Eyed Peas at the time, Toby Keith, and then Aerosmith. So that was the sort of the
Ooh.
three as you came
Okay.
in. So pretty solid, big names, at least around that
Yeah.
time. But that was sort of like the pre-drinks time, right? So then
Mm,
I got friends from college and high school back, people from my wedding, in addition to family, because like family only the first year. And so the
mm,
second time I had a little more of my friends with me and, got to do that and kind of go up on stage. I think it was Mike Vrabel and Larry Izzo and myself were up on stage for
mm,
Love in an Elevator with Aerosmith. So anyway, like the point of the story was the party itself was kind of cool, but then as night goes long, cigars and drinks, and it gets to be 2 and 3 a.m. and kind of stuff. Lionel Richie had a little room off the main ballroom. And it was just kind of like a little rumor. Hey, I heard Lionel Richie is here, and there was a piano that they had
Mm,
rolled in. So there's, I mean, a room not much bigger than my office here at my house, and
mm.
it was just a piano and
Wow.
Lionel and about 5 or 6 of us. And it was, the morning after the Super Bowl, half in the bag, happiest day of your life kind of thing, and he's playing easy. Uh, like
Talk about the song choice.
yes, exactly. It was perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect. So all I'm saying is like
Yeah.
little of the cool stuff with Snoop and all the different kind of things that happened the very first one. I
Mm.
was like the second time around, I'm like, I'm doing every inch of it. Like, like I'm not gonna pass any of this stuff by. So it's just little stuff like that actually sticks in my memory as much as this play and that play kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already enjoying the storytelling. You talk about like the after party that happened after Super Bowl 38 against Carolina,
Yeah,
and like I want to go back to the first one because
yeah,
you mentioned like that one was the special one in terms of like
yeah,
it was right after 9/11. It was
yeah.
about 5 months after 9/11 to be exact, and and walk us through the decision to come out as a team. And the '01 Patriots were the first team to do that. And you see that how that's become like a tradition
Yeah.
in every Super Bowl since. But the '01 Patriots were the first team to decide to come out as a team as a whole during Super Bowl introductions. Walk us through the decision process and what went into it.
I really wish there was some sort of romanticized version of this story where we had the speech and the captain stood up and said we're going to do this. It
Yeah.
kind of happened a little more organically, and I think
Mhm.
Willie McGinnis was always one of the strongest voices in our locker room, one of our biggest leaders.
Yeah.
Willie's 55, 56, and 57. The two lockers that would have been between us are both retired.
Mm.
So he and I were the 6 years I was here was right next to Willie. Willie kind of runs things in that locker room. First overall picker, a first round pick years and years ago,
Mm.
and kind of was just like top dog. And I my recollection, and mine might not match others, but that it was sort of more of a late season as things started rolling. Hey, we're not doing that. Like
Mm.
we don't need to do the announcement thing. We should just go together. But it wasn't like some like music playing in the background and some speech. We're gonna do it as a team. Like it was really more like, nah, we're a bunch of guys are
Yeah.
not expecting to do well. And we're just gonna do it together. And again, it's not as if Saturday night before the Super Bowl at the hotel we all got together today. We're gonna like it's just you got to the edge of that bubble like we always do, and you kind of look around and go, no, no, and that's just kind of how they decided to handle it. And as a young guy on that team, just fall in line, baby.
Like when you arrived in
Yeah,
2000, you are a rookie.
yeah,
Belichick's also his first year. The now former head coach of the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick,
yeah.
his first year in New England as the head coach of the Patriots,
Hmm.
and obviously the big story still is right now we're still dealing with like the smolderings, if you will, of Bill
Yeah,
Belichick no longer being the head coach and general manager of the New England Patriots after
yeah,
24 years,
yeah. It's
which
wild.
which is really still it's still hard to believe because like I mean a quarter of a century that's pretty much an entire generation. That's
Right,
all that fans have ever known.
right,
But you were there in 2000 when everything began, not in terms of just the winning, but obviously that first year. I mean, it was a tough year record wise, but
right.
the foundation began to be laid out. What do you remember from your rookie year in terms of Bill Belichick installing the culture and trying to implement a system in which that would lead to future success?
Yeah, I mean, I think the foundation idea is a really good way to frame this because it's a 5-11 year. We weren't very good in 2000,
Yeah.
and I've heard this story. I'm not sources guy. I'm not a journalist, and
Yeah.
not that I ever was. But let's just put it this
Yeah.
way. I've had conversations all the way up and down sort of the organization about sort of what 2000 was, what it looks
Mm.
like in the rear view, and what they were thinking, and what was going down. They knew the team they took over was an incomplete team, right? And that they
Yeah.
knew that they had, and this happens a lot. It's not like it was unique to the Patriots, but new
Yeah.
staff comes in, sort of replacing the old staff, knowing, X percent of these guys are our kind of guys. Some of them aren't. We would have
Mm,
never drafted or signed them.
yeah.
And there's an attrition that happens. And that's just kind of natural. But because we was a bad team, there's a lot of that sort of November, December football. And I
Mm,
ended up on IR and missed the last few games or whatever that
mm,
season, actually.
mm,
J.R. Redmond, old J.R. Redmond, our running
mm.
back in that same draft class of 2000, kicked me in the back of the calf in a in like a in a in
Ew.
a, in a practice. I was blocking for
Mm,
J.R. and he ran on my back and got my calf. So I did miss a few games there at the end, but my point of it is, as you got into sort of the stretch, right, the November, December, it became a lot about like who wants to be on this team, and it's sort of and that's what it is. It's like you're being very, very much physically challenged with what is kind of known around the league to be one of the harder, longer practices and sort of the weekly schedule that anyone has. And also, it's mental anguish. Like, we stink, but there's a lot of really good players in the room, right? So it's a bad
mm,
team, but with some good players and a lot of good players. So I think part of that was just like, okay, who wants to be a part of this? And it's, this happens a lot of times. It's not just the Patriots thing. Other
yeah.
NFL locker rooms I've been in with Jets or the stuff early on as a rookie with the Rams, like not everyone's always on board.
Mm,
You have 53 guys, and some people are under contract, and some people are looking around going, "Screw this." And I think part of what 2000 was about was basically who wants to be here, who and how badly do they want to be here, and are they really a part of this? And if you're not, cool, great. That's what free agency's for, and waivers and all those kinds of things. There's 31 other places you can play, but I really think there's a bond between the the group of us that survived 2000 and remained on 01 and 2 and 3 and 4, that because we remember 2000 was rough, and it was you
mm.
were being challenged, every day. And trust me, there were exits all over the place that you could have gotten off if you'd have wanted to, but the guys that were around, they wanted to be there.
Like, how did Bill Belichick challenge and yet inspire the guys that would end up becoming corner pieces of that 01, 03, 04 teams? Like with the likes of, you mentioned Willie McGinnis. I'm thinking of Ty Law as well as Rodney Harrison, Teddy Bruschi. Like, because we know that Bill Belichick, his calling card has always been defense. We saw it in the 80s and the early 90s with those great Giants teams that won the Super Bowl in 86 and 90. He comes to New England. He has solid on defensive pieces. Some hadn't arrived just yet, but there were pieces that were there, including yourself. And you mentioned on Willie McGinnis and Teddy Bruschi, who came in 96. Um, what was his philosophy when it came to the style of defense that the Patriots played in the early 2000s, and how that was able to carry over year to year in terms of the defensive success of the team experience?
So, when we talk about that, especially the '01 version, the version when we got really good, like you
Yeah,
have to. I mean, it's easy to talk about Richard Seymour that they nail and sort of their big first draft pick, at least
yeah,
in for the '01 year, and it's like, wow, that they drafted a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying
yeah,
we knew that day, but like this is an All Pro type guy. And you had Willie, who was that caliber of player as well, and Brewski'd been there for a bit and was a leader on the team, and everyone knew Ty was a stud, and Bucky Jones was just a phenom, a freak. He can play. He's a corner, but he's almost as big as some of the linebackers, and he can play on the back end. Like
yeah.
and Lawyer is a huge personality on the team. So you kind of know there's a bunch of dudes, but again, all those guys were a part of that 2000 group as well. I think really Bill's and Scott Pioli as well,
Mm,
filling in the holes of what really would round that thing out, right? And it is really what made the '01 group great. I mean, bringing in like an Anthony Pleasant, Bobby Hamilton, it was just one of those guys that everyone knew about in the league that was just always super consistent, would win his block every time, wasn't going to get 10 sacks, wasn't going to have a bunch of tackles for loss, but like adding Roman Pfeiffer,
mm,
adding T-Buck, Terrell Buckley, like that was just a pieced together group that was kind of like two-thirds of the way there and some studs, but they rounded it out. And I think, there was the issue with Andy Katzenmoyer, who had all those problems with his neck.
mm,
And, he was highly drafted, had a real good year in '99, I believe it was. And then the injury stuff was creeping up with his neck at the time when Bill was taking over. And so, Brewski's transitioning inside, and Roman is played, I don't know, like 10 or 11 years at that time, and had yet to play in like a playoff game. So it's just really those 4 or 5 really, really savvy moves that
Mhm.
rounded that thing out, because, like I mentioned, it was those other 6 names we mentioned were also there in 2000, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like a Brandon Mitchell, I forgot about Brandon, but like, just kind of, the starter group of guys that were super integral, but aren't that like 4 or 5 top names, played a
Mhm.
huge part in sort of getting it over the hump. Mike Vrabel too. Should have mentioned Mike.
Mike
Right?
Vrabel.
Of
Another
course,
Mike
Dave.
Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
Mike Vrabel. Like, I mean, my goodness. Like, when I think of Mike Vrabel, I think of the man who, and I'm sure he obviously wasn't the only Patriots to do this, but the man who could really play both sides of the ball. I mean, the way that he would be utilized in the red zone on certain plays, and so forth. I found it to be really amazing. But the historian in me is genuinely curious, because I wish to have been a fly in the wall. I was very young when the Patriots run began in 2001, and for years I would watch in admiration, but really out of curiosity. And I can't think of anyone better than to ask you this particular question: what made Bill Belichick such a great coach in terms of his schemes and his ability to scheme defenses and plays, and just being extremely prepared, and being aware of like when to send certain personnel out in certain situations in the game? But what made him special?
I think I've said this in a number of forums over the years, especially the dozen years with Ness, and it just would come up in different formats. But I
Mm,
think I think there are a lot of really good defensive coaches in the NFL, obviously, right? There's a lot of
yeah.
guys that really know their stuff. I mean, shoot, look at what Kansas City's done this year. I mean,
Mhm.
we'll talk about the quarterback all the time, but like that's a really, really that's a defensively led team. I believe they're second overall in points per game with an offense that's 15.
Mhm.
So that's so my point is though that you can go around the NFL and find some really, really good defensive coordinators, really good defensive minds, guys that can put you in a really good scheme.
Yeah.
You can go around the NFL in the media component of this from my prior life, and every single week in every single market, in every single major publication, and every
Mhm.
single podcast now and our radio station, somebody's got their keys to the game. Somebody's got their things. Somebody's got their things to watch, and somebody's got this is going to be the most important matchup.
Yeah.
And the point of that is there's 100 people that are going to have eyes on it, and scouting departments too. They're all going to have a look, right? And they're all
Mhm.
going to make their little list. And Bill's greatest gift is that his list is always the right one. And it's really easy to make things that sound right, like, oh, the matchup between, blitz pickup between this really good middle linebacker and the fullback, every
Mhm.
player, the running back, and or how are they going to handle their pressures, or something that sounds football-y and sounds right, that you can write a column and it's one of your bullets, and hey, who's going to dispute that? But when you watch it back, was that really what drove the difference in the game? And that was always the thing that Bill's like, granted, my 6 years there early before I went on to the Jets, you could talk this to, about this to any of the groups that came after, multiple groups of guys
Mhm.
for those many years after. The thing they'll always say is like, damn, we come in on Monday. It's like everything he said was right. like, you know what I mean? And that's really the gift. It's not that he had some magic scheme. It's not that, he called the perfect play at the perfect time. It's just that the NFL is complex. NFL offenses are complex.
Mhm.
You have to really learn to beat a team what makes them tick and what's doable for you to take away that'll actually drive the difference. So
Mhm.
you don't want, we got to hold them to under 100 yards rushing. Like, well, is that really that big of a deal? There's his gift to sort of put a bow on this is just to figure out what those few things really are and
Mhm.
build a scheme around that, and know that you can't take away everything, right? And it's just that
Mhm.
what is that one thing that will be right when we come in here on Monday? And the flip side of that is when we lose, he's really good at saying, "Here's those 8 plays. See, that's just kind of how it works." So I think that's what guys are most often most impressed with Bill, because defensive football is not about, oh, we had this wild adjustment on cover 4 that worked so good, and can you believe we put our slot corner on their boundary corner or boundary receiver, and wow, what a great difference. I mean, it's a little bit of that, but it's really more honing on the components that you cannot let them major in, and then just sort of mind and fundamentals after that. And Bill was just one of the best teachers ever. He's a doctorate many times over in that world.
When you look at what Bill Belichick has been accomplished throughout his time as head coach of the New England Patriots, and you look at from the time that you were there, you were there during the first part of the dynasty in the early 2000s, and like from afar and as part of the media, you are also able to share your perspective. Well, what the television audience in New England on Nesson for many years, and from a fan perspective, we were able to to see like, okay, the X's and O's, like, okay, like this is what was happening. This is what the Patriots were able to do on offense. This is what they were able to do on defense, and so forth. What I think about in the 24 years that Bill Belichick was there in New England is that Belichick's ability to take the lessons that were learned from the previous year and to be able to apply it to the following year. Is that a fair assessment in terms of just his encyclopedic memory and his ability to take those lessons that were learned from the year prior, whether you won or not, and be able to apply it to the new season? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think when you have as much experience as Bill does, and the times he had with the Lions, the going way back, right, and then the
Mm,
Browns days, and then obviously his stuff with the Giants, and I mean, I'd have timeline correct here. I think there was a Colts time there, or whatever. But the point is, it was just little varied perspectives. Like he'd seen so many different things and been around so many different high level coaches, and is a bit of a sponge. It's kind of how he is. He's a little socially inept, but but he's a cool dude, but just in sort of a quirky way. But he's in the room, he's soaking it up, right? And
mm,
he's been in a lot of big time rooms.
mm,
And I think that's probably one of the things that's most misunderstood about Bill. Just the notion that that sort of uh, the derogatory sort of idea of someone being the smartest guy in the room or whatever, right? I think people
mm,
presume that Bill is just, I'm the smartest football guy here and you're all below me or something. Now, Bill is like constantly studying, constantly looking at other people's stuff, uh, soaking it all in and learning. And that's it's an expression that I went to Babson when I got done in the NFL, and one of the big things they would always talk about is, it's super important in life to be successful. You never want to. If you think you are the smartest guy in the room, you actually might be, and that means you're in a fucked up room. Like you need to
mm,
you need to
mm,
go find better rooms, right? And I really do think that that's Bill, right? I think people think that he just walks in and expects everyone to bend knees to him. He's a collaborator, and it's been really annoying, obviously, to hear sort of the idea that he needed to be more collaborative. I mean, that's always been his style. Like he defers all the time. I don't know the personnel side and how those decisions are made necessarily, but from the coaching side, like he's a work with his guys kind of guy. And so when you talk about like referring back to old things, like he's the ultimate, okay, a coordinator that I respect, in a group that we study a lot, maybe we face them several times. They do some things very similar to us, and this caused them problems. And now we get our bite at the apple. We can't, sort of recreate their mistakes. But he was always really good at just finding out what was relevant from other stuff going on in the league. Like you got to watch our game, you got to break down our tape, you got to figure out what we did wrong and
mm.
and move forward. But you don't want to miss the lesson in that, Colts Dolphins game that also happened, where there's going to be 5 or 6 plays that are actually probably pertinent, things we're going to need to know for later, and the way that they'll apply or try to use that against us. So that was kind of his shtick, right? Like he
Mm.
saw us and he was good at seeing us, the best at seeing us. But, he was seeing everything as well. And like he just didn't miss much. And I think that's what, always made him unique.
This past season, it was a trying one for the Patriots in every sense of the word. There's no way to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
And when you haven't been in the NFL locker room, And when you hear stories of the dysfunctions that took place this past season, whether it be among like the players and the Mac Jones saga, and as well as just what, according to the media, I don't know how true it is, it just seemed to be that there was a rift between the quarterback and the head coach, and as well as like obviously the controversy as to like who's going to start is going to be Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi and so forth. In your view, what went wrong for the Patriots this season? And is it as simple as quarterback play, or do you think that there were other underlying factors as well?
It's a 2-year thing, and that's something that I got. I got more acclimated to this kind of frame of mind during sort of maybe the second half of my years at Nesson, because we were, you're asked to do wagering segments, right? You're supposed to,
Mhm.
you're going to make recommendations to people. That's real money involved. You don't want to just say some BS, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important that when you start to study trends, you start to understand what's going on in other places, and you sort of divorce yourself from the common things that people say, the narrative stuff. And I think one of the biggest of those that you learn, like, I need to know. So take the Patriots out of this equation. I need to know what's going to happen in this upcoming game. I want to make an educated guess. I want to prepare myself. I want to talk about it because we're going to do a show on it, right? If you tell me these two things are happening, I can. I've gotten many, many steps towards to knowing how this is going to end than
Mm.
anything else that people are going to talk about. And it's O-line health and quarterback play. And I it's something that happened to them for 2 years. I don't have an answer to why it is. But for 2 seasons, the 2022 season and the 2023 season,
Yeah.
they were at or near the top, within the top few slots of snaps missed at the offensive line. And
Mm.
it, whatever else you can spin yourself in circles about stories going on with a team, take that profile of a team that, each year, each go through every NFL season and go through those top few teams that have that issue, and they have a quarterback that's not good enough. Like, he's had shown some promise, but he's not at that sort of franchise level. He's struggling quite a bit. He's turning the ball over like crazy. You take in offensive line snaps miss for whatever your intended was, and I think the consensus was here for really the last previous 2 seasons. If they'd have had their group of five and gotten them for at least maybe 14 of those 16 games, but
Yeah.
it was snaps missed, chaos in the offensive line, and a quarterback that wasn't good enough. You take that two combinations, and we gotta find something to talk about for 5 months, and we always talk about other shit, but that's
Yep.
it. Like, you can't win with that scenario when you're, especially with a group that was so dependent on running the football. And this is sort of like a little 3-year time capsule lesson. But when Josh had the success he had with Mac,
Yeah.
he had a healthy Damian Harris. Damian Harris had the best year of his career. He had like 13 touchdowns or something like that. He
Yep.
was a
Mhm.
he was a beast, and he was paired with Ramonde, was this up and coming new dude, and it was a great 1-2 healthy offensive line. So all the issues people always talk about this, like, oh, he had three offensive coordinators in 3 years. No, he had 1 year of healthy offensive line play. The OC was different, yeah, sure, whatever. But then he had 2 without it. So the healthy line play doesn't just have to do with protections, because we saw Mac screw up endlessly with plays where the protection wasn't the issue, just blowing the read of the throw. Uh, and I think what happens, I didn't play quarterback. I'll just look at it from the look in the other direction. When a team can't run the football consistently, when they can't get, first downs on 3rd and 3, when they don't get 3+ on first down, when they choose to run, when they are 2nd and 8 and they only get 1, right? And you
Mm.
put yourself in these third and longer situations, none of those teams do well. None of them do well, right?
Mm.
And that was what the Patriots did with Mac. And it wasn't because Mac was coached better. It wasn't because Mac was supported better. They had a healthier offensive line, and they got ahead of the sticks far more frequently. And they could also run the ball in the red zone. And that's super important. Teams that run pretty well up to the 40 and then they get into the high red and all of a sudden they can't move it down low, they don't score. And when you throw into that a quarterback who's, just in candor, if we'd have gone, it's not to knock the guy. I think it's just a factual matter. If you'd have taken the 10 sort of ugliest interceptions you saw in the NFL this year, like just the 10, like woo, not just, hey,
Yeah.
defensive player made a play. You took the 10 plays, like, damn, what the hell was that? The Patriots quarterback had 5 of them.
Yeah.
I mean that, and that's not, hey, the protection, hey, the whatever. It was like unrelated to that. So you throw all those things in the mix, nobody is being successful. And it has nothing to do with Mac. It has nothing to do with any of the names involved. You put that profile on the field. Offensive line chaos, no continuity, not the reps that you expected to get out of the guys. You know, you right tackles a midseason change over the year prior. Marcus Cannon, stud, had a huge, awesome career. He basically came out of retirement, came off his couch to try to help. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and then you have, you know, they try to move their left tackle from the year prior to right tackle. He gets injured and he's playing guard. Like, and now he's in Miami as a guard. Like, it's just that those are the things that you can't win with. You can't. So I look at, it's kind of that, like, you know, see the forest but for the trees kind of idea. Like,
Yeah.
that's the stuff that happened. And I think some of the best lessons are really, okay, if you don't buy that analysis and think it's just, you know, too much bagging on them or making excuses or something like for the coaching staff, look around the league, look around the NFL. The Rams win the Super Bowl. The Rams come back, lose their quarterback, have a bunch of health issues himself. They go and become a 5-12 team. And their quarterback comes back. Those health issues aren't as much of an issue the next year. They're now a playoff team. That's it. Like, it's it. Like, I mean, Sean McVay, when they were 5-12, didn't become a bad play caller. Sean McVay didn't call worse plays than the year before. Sean McVay didn't have his guy. And the reality of the situation in the NFL is nobody wins. Not Bill. It's not, and that's not a knock on Bill Belichick. It's not. If you give him a sub-starter level quarterback, he's not going to win. Nobody does. And so that's the unfortunate part. Bill, I think, got hit with the perfect storm. Maybe some of it could have been controlled with a little better depth sort of work, I
Mm,
guess, in free
mm.
agency or something. Maybe they were a little unprepared with their next wave of guys, you know, or they opted young. And some of those young guys look really good. Maybe just weren't quite there the worst September, October. Shoot, I feel like ridiculous even saying that. I know what I felt like in September, October, my first year. Like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. Like, you're confused, you know, like you're just getting
Yeah.
the hang of this stuff. So I think it's the perfect storm. Is an offensive line in disarray for 2 seasons and a quarterback that couldn't stop turning the ball over unprompted.
Mm.
Nobody wins that way. Nobody wins that way.
The Patriots are going to have pick number 3 in this upcoming April's NFL draft. And there's so much discussion as to what the Patriots should do, who should they draft at number 3. And for an organization that in which that right now it's abundantly clear they need a quarterback. But I this is part of the reason why I'm so excited to speak with you on this particular topic, and I want to pick your brain on it, is the Patriots have a laundry list of needs. It's not just one particular area, but they have a laundry list of needs. You have the 3rd overall pick in this April's NFL draft. Matt, who do you target and why?
So I try to back into this conversation and think of it from, put yourself in, you've just been named general manager of this team. I know they're not using that title here, right?
Yeah.
Say it's not the Patriots. So again, you can divorce yourself from any thoughts of being, you know, persuaded by fandom or something like that. You're the new general manager and you're the new head coach of, you know, the San Jose Stallions. We'll just make up a
Yeah.
team, right? The point
Yeah.
of this is, if you have the profile of a team without a starting quarterback, you've determined through evaluation, a long 3-year eval, there were some positives, absolutely, but just not enough there. And you're, for the first time in 24 years, at this part of the draft.
Mhm.
I get that there are other needs. Of course, there's other needs, right? I mean, Trent Brown has been excellent, but he's been inconsistent with availability, and it seems to be, is he on board or not? I don't know. Does he want to be here? Who knows, right? Maybe,
Mm.
I don't know. But it's also a super duper important position, left tackle. And, you know, it's the kind of ones where you look around the league and the teams that are really stable probably have that guy either as a high first rounder that they nailed or a second contract that's in a big money, paying them $15 million a year kind of thing, right? There aren't really many half-step teams where it's kind of like them, kind of do. There's a ton of positives, but there's some negatives. Let's do a one-year deal. Let's do a two-year deal. People aren't doing that with their left tackles much and having a lot of success. So it might be the year where they got to make a decision on that side, right? Um, all I'm getting at here, though, is if you're that sort of hypothetical team that has to make that call and it's your job on the line, you got to get a quarterback. And, and the reason I say that is just watch the carousel. Watch the coaches and general managers that come and go in this league. The only one you can probably come up with right now where he had a guy and still lost the gig was Staley in
Yeah.
LA. There aren't very many other guys who are, most of them are losing the job and they're also changing the personnel at that quarterback spot. So I think it's an incredible risk if you're in that position to say, you know what, let's go use the third overall pick on a left tackle, or let's go use the third overall pick on a wide receiver. You might get yourself an excellent one of either of those two things. But if Trent Brown had not been there this year, and he played at a super high level for maybe 2/3 of his games, highly graded out for the people to watch the PFF stuff and all that, or
Yeah.
just, super solid, sometimes absolutely dominant. But fine, trade him out, pretend like this year didn't happen, and put whoever it is you think should be the third overall pick, which might be the first guy. Maybe it's the guy from Notre Dame, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Put him in that spot, replay the season. What happens different? I, I don't know. Not much. Is there a game better? Maybe. I don't know, because he plays all 17 instead. I don't know. Is it that much difference? Maybe not. And then people make the argument, obviously, for Harrison as the wide receiver. Of
Mhm.
course, there'll be more explosive plays. And but that's the Lamborghini position. Sometimes the Lamborghini breaks down. So it's not. You don't usually take teams that are, hey, we're a 9-7 team, and you know what, we're now a 14-2 team because we changed wide. We improved at that one spot. I know people use the Stephon Diggs example of some team that really jetted forward, but there was a lot of. I think there was other factors. It was a really good defense at that time as well. So it is a little bit of both. But my point is this: you would not want to be that general manager and be sitting here in year 2 or year 3, still looking at that guy because that one moment you got at the top, you just said, hey, well, we'll develop the 4th quarterback in this class or the 5th quarterback in the class. We'll develop a guy. Because if you're wrong and still looking for that guy, and you're 8-7, or I'm sorry, 8-9 in these days, or you're
Mhm.
a little under 500, right around at 10-8 or something, probably not keeping your job. You're not. And what will keep you your job is nailing that quarterback pick. And that doesn't mean that you have to take it with a 3rd overall. I mean, you could hypothetically trade back, but but you need to address it, and you need to hit. You need to hit, because the reality, I think, of those gigs in this day and age, if you don't hit on quarterback, it doesn't mean you have to. You have to draft the All Pro, but you need to draft a guy who's going to be worth a second contract, who's franchise level, somebody that someday you can pay 30 or 40 or $50 million a year, because that's the world we live in. If you don't have that guy, you're part of that percentage of the teams that are still looking and your job security is low. So I think there's a sequence to things. You do build teams from the inside out, and I think that saying to people typically makes them think line play, right? And that's part of it, and it's super huge. But quarterback's under center, right in the middle of it, right? So the inside out stuff, it involves him, right? Because for real, in this particular season, the Patriots wouldn't be drafting 3rd overall if they had a better quarterback play. They wouldn't. I
Yeah.
don't know if they'd been a playoff team because the roster was decimated with injuries. But there are 3, 4, maybe more games difference without all those turnovers. There really are, and just finishing some drives, because his games in this league, they come down to a score too. It's not that dramatically different from what looks like good enough and just really bad. It's not as far as you think. So my view is this: I mean, people will always point to, hey, sometimes oftentimes the second overall taking quarterback isn't necessarily a star. I get that, right? So
Mhm.
uh, maybe you take the 3rd. I think when you start looking at sort of historical rounds of quarterbacks and sort of the history of sort of classes, it, the further you go down the class, the risk of that, or the likelihood of that not being hit, increases dramatically. Maybe you get Brock Purdy. I mean, okay, but you're not in a situation where a staff basically lost their job
Mhm.
uh, because they didn't have a guy. So you're going to have to swing high, and I think that means they'll probably take either the second or third available dude, and that's just my best guess. And if they don't, I'm telling you, If they say, hey, we can get away with taking a tackle or receiver there, now you're looking at the fourth. Now you're maybe looking at the fifth or the sixth of a class, or you're spending high on a Kirk Cousins or Mayfield kind of
Mm.
situation, and then you're also shopping again 2 years from now. It's just real risky, man. And the way I always think of it is, it ain't to win a sports debate. It ain't to win some shit at the water cooler. It's to keep your job. I think
Exactly.
you got to nail the quarterback eval, and you got to get one in house, and then you build a team around that. That's my view.
I know we're up against it. Just had one last question to ask you, and there was a general consensus going into like the coaching carousel, or should I say, coaching free agency,
Yeah.
that Bill Belichick, he'll be snatched up, probably the first thing snatched off the market. No big deal, easy peasy. Here we are in February, 9 days before the Super Bowl, and all of the head coaching openings are now filled. How surprising is it to you that Bill Belichick, as of right now, is how surprising is it for you that Bill Belichick is still looking for a head coaching job in the NFL at this point in juncture? How surprising is it to you?
So I think this really goes more to the psychology of owners these days than it does to Bill's acumen or ability or what he could have done for a team.
Mm,
I think if you look at all the firings around the NFL, and we need to kind of separate the idea of what someone would do for you and what he might cost. Bill, and this is my presumption, of course, I'm not a part of any negotiations he had thus far, but Bill is going to be a top of market cost guy. And a lot of owners know that when you go out and get a first time guy, they don't cost as much. Now, we don't get to sort of the gristmill of evaluation of contracts and things like that we get to do with free agency wide receiver, the free agency quarterback, or free agency defensive end or corner or whatever. We get to have those debates and talk about it. But coaches' contracts are pretty kept under wraps. And the
mm,
reality of the situation is, if you're coming in and talking about a guy that will be 72 years old, and we've seen contracts already in this particular coaching cycle go for 6-year deals. 6-year deals, right?
no.
Now, Bill's probably not being offered that, but who knows what Bill's asking for, right? So I think when all we know that when someone didn't hire him doesn't know what his position was, what his ask was, personnel control, which has obviously been beat around a lot, but what he needed from them much more than what they needed back. That's why I think the passing comes from, because you're not going to get away with paying Bill Belichick what you can pay Mike McDonald. You're not, right? And you get to keep it secret what you didn't do, because you're saying to that first time head coach, first time you get a shot here, oh, you want, I'll give you, 3 guaranteed years or something like that. But the point is, they don't have nearly as much leverage. They're thrilled to get that first gig. Bill's got all these rings. Bill's not in that situation. He's got 8 Super Bowl rings, 6 as a head coach. He's won more, games than all but one dude. So he's in a different negotiating position, and they're on the other side of it going, damn, I don't know where Bill's going to be at 2 years from
Mm,
now or 3 years from now. Can I offer him a 3 or 4 year contract? What he's got a lot of leverage sitting opposite me, and he wants the world. And I'm scared that if I don't like how things go with Bill 2 years from now, that I might be paying the next year at a big number and then shopping for an entire new staff. So he had a lot of stuff working against him beyond just, dude, that's the best coach in the NFL, because it is, and that never stops being true. And not being signed right now doesn't mean that it's not two people are shopping, right? There's not a guy, like asking for porridge going, please, sir, can I have your job? It's a guy evaluating you while you're evaluating him. And they didn't find a meeting of the minds. And honestly, I didn't think a lot of the vacancies, the idea of, okay, of course someone's going to snatch up Bill. That's what everyone thought. I thought it too. But then you start going, situation by situation and going, hmm, actually some of the most appealing ones might be teams that actually still have their coach, like Philly
mm,
or like Dallas,
yeah.
and those actually might be more appealing for him, because he might be looking at going, wait a minute, like Carolina or even Atlanta. I know some people feel strongly about their roster. I do a little less so, but if you have uncertainty going into a situation. I don't know, like, how appealing is that to someone at his age who's, like, kinda looking for what Tom was looking like or for,
Mm,
excuse me. I mean,
yeah.
what was Tom's situation? Looking around? No, he didn't get offered by 10 teams. Why? Because 10 teams didn't know if they'd be, again, like we had the conversation earlier about the 3rd overall pick, picking
Yeah.
another quarterback, right?
Mhm.
So the quarterbacks are they're shopping for the quarterback. The quarterback needs that one situation. Like, where's the team that's really close that I can take him across the line and just do this for a couple of years? And Tom found that place. And I think Bill was at a bit of a disadvantage because he's kind of shopping for that place. And even if Bill, and
Mm,
again, none of us know this. I don't know this certainly. We don't know that he went into the room and said, "I'm going to coach 5 more years." He may have said that. I mean, he's a diehard. Like, he hasn't put any "I'm going to stop coaching at X age" thing out there. He hasn't done that. But you have to remember the other side of the table. It's an owner that's going, okay. Um, I don't think Bill's necessarily bringing along the guy that I'll hire as successor. At least I haven't seen him yet, right? So I'm going to get Bill, amazing Bill. I'm sure he'll turn it around for me. But what am I doing again in 2 years, right? Do I have to do all this over again and not have a guy in house? And I don't know. I kind of get that this was another, that same phrase again, perfect storm, to where you kind of see why it didn't happen. And with Dallas holding tight and Philly holding tight, those teams that are high caliber but plateauing, that's the
mm.
place you put Bill. Man, I mean, he's just gonna, yeah, he's gonna crush it. Not that he couldn't help any situation, of course he could, but the appeal I think has to be the same for both sides, and I don't think that was necessarily the case in all of these. And you kind of understand. I don't think I agree with them passing, but you might
Yeah.
understand what the rationale for why they may have.
Absolutely. I want to say thank you so much, Matt Chatham, three-time Super Bowl champion, former NFL linebacker, a part of Patriots dynasty 1.0. Thank you so much, man, for taking the time and continue to kill it on the grill. And wait, by the way, your Twitter makes me hungry, by the way. I just want to let you know that up front. So
That's the
I'm
idea.
blaming you for
Yeah.
having a massive appetite right now, but it is an honor and a privilege to have the chance to speak with you, Matt. Thank you so much for the time and for hopping on the Hub of Champions podcast.
All right, my pleasure. We're actually going to be out in Vegas for the Super Bowl
Ooh.
with my company, Rub Smoke Love. We're out there for the what do they call it? The culinary kickoff, the NFL's culinary kickoff. And so celebrity chefs from all over the country, NFL cities are coming out, and they're cooking. It's almost sort of like a chopped kind of thing where they're
Mm.
taking some of our products and going to make a surprise meal for the people at the culinary kickoff. So I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, everything in life now is all about my rubs, beefcake, and gold bark, and that kind of life. So that's what we're into these days.
Absolutely. I look forward to hearing more about it.
Take care. Thanks for having me.